First of all, broadly, I want your take. Lyft and Uber did this weird thing, lowering the price that people expect to pay for rides while also adding this different level of convenience. But the business models aren't clear yet, even for those businesses, even though they're valued huge. What's the end game here? How does this play out?
Well, as they go public, I think one of the things, if you look at like Lyft's public offering documents, is how are they going to adapt to regulation? And regulation is, well formed in New York, and a lot of things that have happened in New York are taking, they're getting a lot of gravity in other places like California, and they will have an effect on the expenses, right? So if you have to pay your drivers a certain amount of money, you have to work that into your business strategy. And I think the end game here is how are these companies going to be able to adapt to regulation? They will have to take on things like an added expense of paying their drivers a living wage in New York and probably elsewhere over time, and how they decide to adapt their business model to make those changes is going to really dictate who's the successor and who's not.
So are prices going up?
Prices will be going up for a number of reasons. One, because you've got to pay drivers the right amount. Two, because there's congestion surcharge that's been added in the core of Manhattan. It's $2.75 on every Uber trip. And they may also go up primarily because in New York City, there's a sort of cap on vehicles now. So
what is the cap?
The cap is a local law that was passed in 2018, and it basically said that the agency, which never had its own power to stop the influx of vehicles, had to close the doors. No more vehicle licenses can be issued unless it's for an accessible vehicle. And those vehicles do cost more to maintain, another reason why costs could go up. And ultimately, it was the result of over 3 years of back and forth. I think you probably all remember in 2015 when council tried this before to sort of stop the flow of vehicles on the road.
Right, we do. Well, how many vehicles have Uber and Lyft added to just the roads right here in Manhattan?
There's now about 200,000 licensed vehicles in New York City. 4 or 5 years ago, that number was closer to 80,000. So Uber and Lyft alone have about 80,000 drivers working with them that are working in probably over 100,000 vehicles. It's an enormous jump in a very short period of time. And the concentration is where the money is. It's in Manhattan.
I want to go back to this idea of paying drivers a living wage. They're independent contractors. It's been a contentious issue. We've seen suits that have been brought forth where Uber and Lyft are concerned. And by the way, not just them, but other companies like FedEx as well over the years. So when you talk about wages and what that would mean in a city like New York, what would that look like, especially given those business models?
Right, so they're primarily considered independent contractors. People all over the country are struggling with what do you do to help this workforce out, since they don't have the protection of employee-employer. And ultimately in New York, what we did was we priced the minute and the mile. You can't pay them less than a certain minute and a certain mile. Over the course of an hour, it works out to the equivalent of what would be a minimum wage, but it's not a one-for-one comparison.
New York has an inordinate amount of power here, being the size city that it is. It used to be all about yellow cabs. Now it seems like what we used to call, I hope this isn't a pejorative term, gypsy cabs, have taken over, because now all the people who would have been doing that are driving Uber and Lyft. What is New York, from a worker perspective, you think aiming to do, even longer term, that's going to affect Uber, Lyft, the entire ride-hailing industry when it comes to workers' rights and wages?
When it comes to workers, I think we've done the big work, which is established pay protection. So established a floor. You cannot pay them less. And you see this happening all over the country. In LA, there were strikes the other day. Drivers all over the country are reacting to unilateral pay cuts that may help the business model but aren't helping the people that provide the service. One day there'll be automation, but it's not around the corner.
Real quickly, Meera, you mentioned the congestion surcharge, which already exists, but there is most likely going to be congestion pricing here as well. First time in the country, I believe, in Manhattan. Is that going to minimize the usage of these services when the prices continue to move up like this?
I think it will. It may actually have a positive effect on the services. I do think congestion pricing is coming within a few weeks. Well, a week or so we'll know. But when there is a larger cost of bringing your personal car in, even if the cost of an Uber goes up, it still might be more economical to take that Uber rather than to bring your personal car in. And I think that's ultimately the goal of congestion policy, is to have cars used efficiently and the professional drivers who transport passengers doing that work.